Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of your faces. I've seen many of your faces throughout as of yesterday and today, and I'm just so happy that you were able to make it to this session. You all are in for a treat, one, because we have a wonderful panel, but then also, I think we can get a little more comfortable with each other, since this is a smaller group. Okay, so I want you to have your questions ready because in between time, I think we're going to have some audience questions as we go through our questions. Does that work for you all? Delicious. My name is Lindiwe Davis. I just want to call out for the folks that are watching virtually. Feel free to turn on closed caption. You have the option there. We want to make sure that everyone knows that accessibility is top of mind. If you have questions, I imagine that the audience will probably have some of those similar questions, so fear not. But again, my name is Lindiwe Davis. I've been working at Google since 2018. Started off originally as a contractor, shifted into full-time work. So want to call that out, as I did in yesterday's panel, that it doesn't matter how you get to where you're going to, there's options all over the place. I work in the culture, belonging, and inclusion space, DEI, organizational effectiveness, so I'm kind of like a round robin of deliciousness, as I imagine all of you are as well. I've been in corporate America for about 27 years, but working for the last 30 years, okay? It's all the oil. It's lots of oil, okay? Lots of water as well. But super, super excited for today's panel where we're talking about the power of the pivot. I imagine all of you have also had many pivots in your life, whether it's professional, whether it is just personal, and there's always a way through those pivots as they occur. So first up, I want you to just give a round of applause for yourselves. And just welcome the panel here with a warmer welcome than that. So first up, Suzanne, introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Such a pleasure being here and sharing this special sacred space with all of you. I am Suzanne Lesko. I go by call sign Xena. I'm a recently retired Navy captain. I was a combat aviator and finished off as a public affairs officer, led missions all over the world, every continent with the exception of Antarctica. And throughout that, I really learned as a woman in a man's world is resiliency and bounce back ability. And that's what I speak on now and talk about resiliency as your greatest superpower. And each of those superpowers is an arrow in your quiver. So today, hopefully, we'll be able to share some of those wisdom nuggets with you. And grew up in Western PA, and I live in Naples, Florida.
Thank you, Suzanne. Dana.
I'm Dana White. I often get so confused because people are like, I think God just shows God has a sense of humor. But I am from Charlottesville, Virginia. Fun fact about me is my older brother used to babysit Larry Green. There you go. So I am a managing director at Juno Collective, but I have had many, many job pivots, and I won't go in, but I went to school in Chicago. I'm a Chinese speaker. I majored in Chinese history. And what I would say about pivots is some are intended pivots and some are unintended pivots. And so I've worked in media. I've pivoted into politics. I used to work for Senator John McCain. I worked at the Department of Defense twice, once on the China desk and then as Chief Pentagon spokesperson. But I've also worked in automotive. I lived in Paris for 3 years working at Renault. I worked at the Wall Street Journal and lived in Hong Kong. So I have pivoted a lot, and at the heart of my pivots, I have to say, is prayer and faith. Mm-hmm. And I can get into a big pivot that happened for me, but that's kind of me in a nutshell. I don't necessarily believe in plans, and hopefully we can talk about that too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. Thanks.
Thank you, Dana. Dr. Stephen.
Hi, Stephen Peters, Hampton University alumni. The real HU. I knew that was going to generate some excitement. I am the president and CEO of the Peters Group, author, keynote speaker, executive coach, and I pivot every day as the husband of the other Dr. Peters.
Thank you, Stephen. As I said before, we're going to be talking about what does it mean to pivot, when to know when to pivot, right? How you can use your community, your networking, your connections. The person right beside you could be someone that you're meant to talk to and get to know and organically have in your pathway. So never, ever forget about that. But first off, Suzanne, I'm going to throw this first question over to you. What are some signs that it might be time to actually pivot?
Great question. From personal experience, I think best signs are you're starting to feel that burnout. You're not feeling that joy, that light every day at work. Like, I am so excited, I'm so passionate to go to work. I find those are like the immediate acute signs. And then over time, that can become like a chronic, like, okay, it's time to go. And it's almost like you become apathetic. And you never want to get to that place, especially if you're doing, high tempo operations, or, you're in corporate, you're working finance, or you're in the military, you're doing national security kind of stuff. I think those are two really good signs. Burnout, you're just not having fun anymore. And that's when you know, okay, it's time to pivot. But most importantly, it's trying to back step a little bit from that and say, I'm kind of feeling a little bit of this, and then always be on that nurturing of your relationships and nourishing them, because they may be the next person that helps you to your next step.
Absolutely. Dana, just to kind of pile on to that question, can you think of a more specific time in your career where you said to yourself, you know what, I think it's time to go? And what did you do?
Oh, so many. So one thing I always do when I start a job is I outline 3 to 5 things I want to get out of that job before I take it. So it always helps me to understand, and it also gets me through, rough days, right? Like, I decided to get this job because I wanted to learn from these people. I needed to get this experience. I needed to be in this location, whatever it is. I needed to make this amount of money because that's my offshoot to the next job, right? So I always make 3 to 5 things that I actually post. This is what I'm supposed to get out of this job. So when those things are accomplished, that's generally when I pivot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great call out. One thing I want to add to that is that when you get into a company, and maybe all of you are already doing this or thinking in this way, but the next time you get into a new company, I want you to ask yourself, what is your exit strategy? Okay? First day you get into the company, what is your exit strategy? Because this is going to help you when things get rocky and get a little rough, or when there's a reorg, or when people are being laid off. You already have a plan in mind and ready, right? The second thing I want to add to that is do not tie your value to wherever it is you work. Okay? This is your job, right? It's not everything about who you are, but it is where you work, and it's the thing that's supplying you. So I want you all to keep that in mind. Stephen, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think my 3-word purpose drives each pivot. And my 3-word purpose is learn, lead, serve. Mm-hmm. So if I can fulfill that mission purpose, I stay. If I can't, I pivot. Mm-hmm. What I have grown to trust is that gut instinct in terms of readiness. And what I have a joy to do, I do for my own company, mm-hmm. right? Fear-based, it's a faith walk. Yeah. Because you write your own checks.
That's right.
And when you are that person responsible for not only yourself, your family and the people that work with you, there's a whole lot of thought cultivated into the work that you do. Mm-hmm. For the past 45 years, I've gotten up between 6:30 every morning, 7 mm-hmm. days a week, with purpose.
That's right.
To learn, lead, and serve.
I love that. I want to throw it out to the audience really quickly. Show of hands, anyone who is getting ready to pivot or is thinking about a pivot. Oh, I like it. I like it. Anyone willing to share what they believe their plan is right now and or what might be holding you back? Go ahead. Hold on 1 second. Who's going to get your mic?
That's so cute.
Hi, my name is Paul Snowbean Jr. I'm currently a senior at Howard University studying electrical engineering. I've interned at Adobe for the last 3 summers doing post-sales consulting, so technical account management, and I want to pivot into the fashion tech space. And as of right now, my plan has just been like getting on newsletters, and a lot of these companies are smaller, even thinking about starting something myself, but just really trying to see what the options out there. What's holding me back is, since it's a new industry, I think like the fear of just not knowing or failing, because the companies are smaller, like it's a lot more that you're going to have to do.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. In fact, that leads us, and I'm going to get to you in just a second, okay? I think that leads us to our next talking point. Like, how do you overcome fear? Stephen, I'm going to start with you.
Wow, that's a loaded question because it's like in real time. I don't think we ever arrive at a place where it's comfortable.
That's right.
But I have accepted the fact, the harsh truth, that our greatest growth happens when we're uncomfortable. And so I have embraced being comfortable, being uncomfortable, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
And in that space, always having a helpmate. I mention my wife a lot. Everywhere I go, I speak. We know your wife, and we've never met her. But I do that because that's truth. That's real talk. When you have a helpmate who encourages you to be the best version of yourself possible, and that's reciprocal, there's power, there's energy in that. And so you can't have courage and fear at the same time.
Right.
They don't coexist. So I choose faith
Okay.
and courage over fear.
Which I believe is, honestly, sister or siblings to that in and of itself.
Yeah,
They're all part of the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Suzanne, same question to you. What has helped you overcome fear?
So, in a lot of the global operations I did, I faced fear in the face. I mean, literally, because sometimes you are just doing stuff to preserve your troops and the people around you, yourself, trying to make good decisions. And something inside of me, as Dr. Stephen shared, is you can't have those two energies coexist. One's a very high frequency, love, and fear's down here. So it was the power of faith, and also knowing that the root of courage is the French word cuore, which means heart. And when I always come from my heart and everything, then it works out, and it's being able to live in that daily, making that daily intention, knowing things will come up, but knowing that the only certainty is uncertainty. So if you go in with that premise in life, you're going to be great. You're going to move through and navigate it with ease like a ninja. So
Thank you so much, Suzanne. Go ahead, Dana.
So I actually have a little bit of a different answer. I actually embrace fear, because if I'm not scared, then it's not big enough. And I've walked into a lot of situations, and I do want to say both my parents went to Howard, met at Howard, married at Howard, and my brother went to Hampton. So I just want to put that out there. But he went to Hampton. So I'm just saying, I'm a Howard baby. So I embrace that because I went to the University of Chicago, and what I appreciate about my college experience is that every day I was scared. I was scared out of my mind, and I had to get used to it. I wasn't good enough. I would go into classes, and I wasn't good enough, and I had to get better, and I felt like U Chicago's freaking mantra should have been, you suck, get better, because that was every day, and it broke me. I'll be very honest. It broke me every day of those 4 years at school. Broke me emotionally, physically, academically. It just broke me. And what it taught me, though, is sometimes getting through is enough. It doesn't have to be pretty. I was a great high school student. I'm like, what do you mean I can't write? Literally, a professor told me, your writing is like a diamond in a brown paper bag. That was my feedback. I was like, but I got a 5 on the English AP. That was, right? I was destroyed. And so I've learned that it's okay to be scared. And that experience also taught me you're good enough. You're good enough to figure it out. Because I've walked into many situations. I walked in to be the head of the Department of Defense, the face of the United States military. Had I ever stood up in front of a podium? No, I had not. But here I was representing the most lethal, consequential department corporate in the world. So I embrace fear, and faith goes a long way with that because I feel like the good Lord has really always pushed me. And someone said something to me the other day that I was thought was, it's like, God doesn't call people who are equipped. He equips the people who are called.
That's right.
Right? And so that is really the story of my life, and I have not really looked for jobs. People have called me for jobs. And so I like to let fear hold me for a minute and then remember that's what you got to do, because that's what the Lord is pushing. If you're scared, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to walk into that and you're like, oh, Lord, and depend on him. And so that has been kind of the secret of my success is I've done a lot of things that I don't think that I was scared to death to do. And I'm like, you go to France, go work for the CEO. I'm like, oh, okay. And you just do it. And so fear for me is an indication of rising.
That's
and
right.
where you need to push yourself to the next level.
Thank you, Dana.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
add to that?
Yeah, go
Because I
ahead.
think that's a really, really critical piece of information, especially as we deal with authenticity and transparency and vulnerability, which are three of the highest pieces that people are looking for now. Instead of knowledge, skill, and experience, they're looking for whether you are authentic, whether you can be vulnerable and transparent. And so my daughter was preparing for this big speech, and she was like, Dad, I am so nervous. You probably never get nervous because you speak to thousands of people. And I said, I get nervous all the time. And so that's talking about really realizing that part of that anxiety or fear is healthy. So there's healthy fear and unhealthy fear. And so I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's valuable information. If that healthy fear is you better be well planned.
That's right.
And prepared to go out there and do what you do. But I will tell you in full transparency, I am more nervous in a room like this with 50 people than I am speaking to 5,000 people. 5,000 people, I can't even see them because the lights are in my face. So I just kind of go do that. But this is intimate, right, when you are right here with people. And so I think it's just a really good point to walk away with that all fear is not bad. There's healthy fear so that we can be well prepared.
Thank you, Stephen.
and fight through it.
Appreciate that. To the gentleman that asked the question or that shared what you were thinking about in terms of fashion and tech, I want you to set up a map for yourself. Just map it out. What would it look like for you to start your own thing, right? What would you need? How would you approach? Who do you want to speak to, et cetera? Just put it on paper and maybe take a little bit to chew on it. Because that's, if it's already in you, then obviously it's something that you might already know you're supposed to be doing. So just take that with you. This gentleman over here, you had a question. Jacket, green jacket, white shirt.
Oh, yes. When we were talking about pivot, I wanted to tell a story of something that I'm pivoting from, and that's why I'm also here to hear other ideas, to hear other recommendations. I'm a finance student from Florida State University, and I'm from Panama Republic. I came here a year ago, and this is my first time in a seminar like this, and I'm hearing people from all over the world, and I'm thinking about my way of pivoting. I thought about going back to Panama Republic after I graduated from finance, and now I took the decision to go to Germany, something that is very fearful for me because it's a very completely different language. But I think that it's the right way, like as you guys were saying, if it makes you scared, then it's the right way to go. And I think that we can learn from everything, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Who else wants to share? I'll take one more person before we get to our next segment. Okay, we're going to keep it moving. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just briefly, fear may keep you from your greatness. Fear may keep you from your greatness. And I feel like you're great at whatever. You also have to remind yourself, and it happened to me 20 years ago. I cast that line, got that job, and I was scared. You know what I didn't do? I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't ask anybody. but I got the dream job. Well, it worked out for me in the end. But at the end of the day, after you said that, I went back over my own life and I said, why did I have that fear? Why? Because I thought I got it. It's all great. But I should have talked to somebody. I put myself on the ledge, I dropped, I got it, and I didn't even say anything to anybody. And so do not have that fear. You're young enough to pivot a lot. We've already been where you're trying to go. We pivoted a lot or we wouldn't be in this room. So don't have a fear. You are going to make it. You're gonna be good.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Talking about strategies for successfully pivoting, Dana, I want to start with you, okay, because you have a storied career thus far, right? What kinds of effective strategies have worked for you in identifying new career paths? And how did you know that those experiences were going to be the best thing they could be for you?
So, like I said, I'll just tell you this really shortly in terms of major pivot. I always wanted to be a lawyer. I decided when I was like 8 years old because Mrs. White had this really cute bob and she drove a white Celica and her husband was at home. He was a professor at UVA and he would like give us apples and we watch Inspector Gadget. And I said, I want to be Mrs. White. Like she had this great life and I decided she was a lawyer and I wanted to be a lawyer. And at 8 years old, that's how I planned my life. I was going to be a lawyer. And then, I don't know, the second time I took the LSAT, not so great, right? I'm not a good test taker. And honestly, I looked up to the Lord and I said, Lord, look, I had a plan, but my plan seems not to be working out. So you do what you do, because I don't know what to do. And I kid you not, about a day later, I had a message on my machine. Yes, I'm that old. I had a message on my answering machine that was from Dr. Condoleezza Rice, who wanted to see me. And so I have been very open. I have decided to be very open to opportunities because I feel like my life has been extraordinary and it's not because of me, and I want to be very clear, be like, yes, Dana, da-da-da. I was prepared. Let me be clear about that. I was prepared to walk through the door. But I didn't know what doors I would be walking through. I mean, I got a phone call from the Wall Street Journal's editorial page, I'm like, huh? And I go to that, and I moved to Hong Kong. It's just, I moved to France. Like, it's about being prepared. And sometimes I really hope young people understand that you don't have to have it all together. Please don't think you have to have it all together. What you have to have is a curiosity and a willingness to work and figure it out. That's what people are looking for. When I'm looking at people, and that's what I think people always saw in me, the attitude that I had about whatever I was doing, whether I was answering. I felt I got a job and I was like answering phones in DC, which everybody does in DC, and I was like, I have a degree from Chicago. And I could have done this in high school. I was so arrogant, right? But then someone kind of taught me, and it's like, look, this is what it is. But I did it well. And people remember that. And because people remembered the attitude of me being a human collator and answering phones or doing that, they're like, okay, you can be a press secretary. You can do this. Hey, they've got a job over at Fox, or they've got to publish. Like, hey, you can do. It's being ready for the opportunity, and don't be afraid. And that happens. I know all the studies around women. We think we have to be 100% of the job, or we don't apply. I've never been like that. I like opportunities that will make me grow, and I've worked in politics a lot, and so I like to be around. I choose jobs based on what I'm going to learn. So at the Wall Street Journal, I'm definitely going to learn how to write well. Ding, 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 right? I want to be around people who are doing excellent things, because I feel like you can never rise above the company that you keep. So I've always, and my grandfather told me that, and I've had that mindset since middle school, honestly, that I need to be with the kids who are going to end up in AP classes. I need to be around the kids, not the kids that I'm with, who were great, was wonderful, and still friends with them, but I needed to plot according to where I wanted to go, not where I was.
That's right.
So Thank you for that question. And
Thank
I
you so
took that
much. I
along.
appreciate that. To add a little bit to that, I mentioned this yesterday in a panel, which is there can be no opportunity without preparation. If you are not prepared for said thing, if you're telling yourself, oh, you know what, I'm going to go to law school, or I'm going to go work at some media space, or I'm going to work in big tech. Well, what are you doing? Are you thinking, oh, yes, I'm here, I have dimples? They're just going to give me a job? No, it does not work that way. It works in other spaces in my life. But, you know, smile at the Starbucks guy. Hi. But for the most, listen, but for the most part, you all would be surprised how far you go if you just smile at people, okay? But for the most part, preparation, everything is about how prepared are you. Again, where's your business card? Where is your portfolio of work? Where is your list of things that you're willing to do for yourself and maintain your integrity while doing so, right? These are the things and ways in which to think about how you're moving and going forward in your career path in general. So I want to throw it back over to Suzanne. Is there a strategy or two that you utilized? You know, you have a storied background as well, military, right? So is there a strategy that you can think of that really helped support your movement?
Yeah, so in my case, similar to Dana's, what she shared, a lot of things I lined up with my prayer and my faith in God. And when I felt peace about what was presented to me, because I had a storied career in the military, and what I mean by that is typical aviation, you have to hit certain leadership positions to get to like the executive officer level or the commanding officer level or the air boss of a carrier. And mine was very mosaic, I would say. It was brought together through people I met. And I, like Dana, I was very much a global citizen, so I speak multiple languages. And I was always curious and intrigued to like, oh, what's this opportunity over here? And it was like the challenge and the people, the impact you'd make at the grassroots level. And so following a lot of that intuition is what I did. So that took me from being an advisor to the Kurdish government, doing stability operations, flying as a civilian in Blackhawks, to coming back to the US. And a lot of times it would be like a by name request, and it would be a phone call you get, and someone would say, think about this. I think you're the right fit. And I'm like, well, let me run by some things, talk it over with family. And then I would get this sense of peace. And that's when I knew I was moving the right direction. And it always seemed like God's hand was in it. And that's what led me to a really unique career, because a lot of my peers would say, how did you make it to Navy captain when you didn't check all the other, career things? But as everyone has echoed, the same sentiments of, the more prepared you are, then you have that freedom. It's almost like when you look at Olympic athletes, especially the aerial skiers, they know when they go out, like they may do a certain trick, but they don't exactly know, right? Because the conditions may change, the wind may come, it may be overcast, and that's kind of how life is, right? So when you are very well prepared, and that's psychological hygiene, sleep hygiene, financial hygiene, all these things, then you have more left and right limits to make these decisions, and it's actually a sense of freedom, ironically. And being able to live in that space, and I think that gives you the confidence to be in the authenticity, the transparency, the vulnerability that moves you to the next level.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Stephen.
Major pivot, and at this point, I think Angela thought I was literally crazy, like lost my mind, because I could tell by the expression on her face. I was speaking at the Austin Civic Center in Texas. 3,000 people that morning, 3,000 that afternoon. They introduced me as an education expert. And I believe humility is the new smart. And it didn't bode well, because I don't think, if I was an expert, I wouldn't be sitting here, right? I'd be somewhere playing golf. But it didn't bode well. And what happened was I was featured on Oprah, right, 13 years before that day. And after Oprah, life changed. Phones didn't stop ringing, all over the world speaking. And when they introduced me that day as an education expert, I'm like, here I am talking to thousands of people, and they're listening to what they should be doing that I haven't done in 13 years. That's hypocrisy.
Yeah.
So when I got home, I was like, Ange, I want to talk to you about a decision that I need to make. She's like, sure, babe, what's up? I says, I want to go back into school. I want to get off the road, go back and run a high school, which I'd never done. I ran a middle school, worked elementary. Never done it before. And so we started calculating book sales, speaking fees. Are you sure? And she's like, if you really feel strongly about this, let's do it. 2 days later, superintendent calls, he's a friend of ours. The high school principal where we lived at the toughest high school in the state had a massive heart attack and passed away. He was 50 years old. Superintendent says, we can't put anybody in there. Would you do it as a principal in residence for 1 year and help us find somebody? Absolutely. We were just talking about me going back on the front lines of the work. 2 days in, I thought I was going to pass away because of the stress. It was like, what are these cell phones and you're on what? TikTok and what's that? What are you saying? Because I'd been away for so long, right? And the third day, my cell phone rang, and it was the BBC in London. In that British accent, they said, Dr. Peters, we've been following you for 10 years, and we heard you are on the front lines of the work. Let us send a film crew to America. Let us film this as a documentary. And of course, the imposter on my shoulder, little Stevie, says, why does the BBC want to follow you? You know, and then I realized why that pivot was necessary. It wasn't necessary just for me not to feel like a hypocrite. It was necessary for me to have visuals for those who were learning from me. Not only are they reading in my books and hearing from my spoken word, they're actually watching me do the work.
Yeah.
And so National Geographic Television purchased the rights to the documentary, American High School, a school in the South. It won Best Education Documentary in Europe. And it's now on Amazon Prime Video. And so that pivot was major. And you're talking about fear. That was major fear, but I felt in my heart that this is hard work.
Absolutely.
But it's hard work. And so we're doing it.
I want to open it up to the audience around this segment as well. If there was one thing that you all needed, I want to hear from one or two people. What would that be in terms of trying to make this jump, trying to get to your next step?
All the way in the back, right where you came.
You said one thing we needed, like something we got out of this?
No, something that you need in order to make your next move.
Okay. Sorry, the chair loves me. Hi, my name is Brooke Demps, recent graduate from FAMU and major in computer information systems. One thing I feel like I need, I think the courage. I have a lot of courage myself. Like, I'm already a very outspoken, like, go get it type person. However, though, you know, like, I'm fresh out of college womb, so, you know, I'm still trying to figure things out. And this is what I needed to see. Like, sometimes things aren't going as planned. It's not what you think is going to happen. Maybe you have to go take that job opportunity that you didn't really want to, because it's going to take you somewhere that you never even thought of.
That's
so definitely would say I probably needed a little bit more courage. And every time I come to the symposium, y'all definitely instill it within me. So I appreciate y'all.
We appreciate you, Brooke.
Appreciate you.
Who else? One other person.
Thank you, everyone on the stage. My name is Wynn. Former Googler, was here for about 6 years, made a pivot into the startup world to
Hi,
focus
Wynn.
more on health equity, which is my passion area. And I think right now, in thinking about my next pivot, the first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was money. because I'm also a caregiver for my mom. So I'm very okay with the idea of me, you know, going through the struggle, living in my car if I have to, if that means like pursuing my passions and giving back in the way that I want to, but I don't want to put my mom in that position. But the thing that came second after the first thought of money is just faith.
Yeah.
Because in any situation that I've been in before, even in my mom's stroke that changed her life and our lives, things have worked out, right? Even when we thought that things were really dark and might not kind of come back up again, faith is kind of what got us through that time, and it will continue to get us through. So I think that's what I need to focus on in this next pivot.
When we appreciate that statement so much, I want to throw this out here is something that occurred to me many, many years ago when I was in New York grinding my ass off. And I do mean grinding. The kind of grind where I didn't have a bed, I didn't have any furniture. I was literally getting a master's degree doing my homework on a window sill sitting on my luggage. Wow. Okay? What I want to tell you is that the moment that that mindset shift happens, and you're thinking about money, the money will always come. Yes. Meaning, once you know you've hit a place in your spirit, in your heart, where you're like, you know what, I worked really hard, and so I'm not even gonna worry about this, it's just gonna come to me. Watch how the universe, God, will bring it to you, even in the hardest times. I can testify to that wholeheartedly. So I want you all to kind of keep that in mind. I want you to keep that in mind. You were already at an amazing company, right? So you're gonna go ahead and use that. Right? Along with all of that intelligence, all of that planning, and all of that strategy. So worry nothing about it and stay true to what you're trying to do. Okay? I want to bring it back to you all here, okay? Kind of talking about gaining access. Because in order for people to, and Wynn brought this up when it comes to money, right? But having access and resources and understanding what you need in the moment, because sometimes you can't just jump, right? I don't like the way this person talked to me. You know what? I'm done with this. But no, you can't do that, right? We can't do that. It has to be more like, okay, she talked to me like that again. Okay. Let me see if I can let her down easy. Because I got a plan to get up out of here, right? So what types of resources outside of learning how to communicate should everyone have in their pocket, right? Suzanne, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to go down the line here.
Yeah, great question. First and foremost, it's about your relationships with yourself, especially the trust and the knowing. And it's also that innate intelligence and knowing the escrow of what's coming next is already within you. Mm-hmm. So just like to her point about, you know, helping your mom and coming from another position and not listening to the collective outside saying, oh, it's the unemployment rate or whatever it is, just like know your true north, right? And aligning with that. So it's three things really that come top of mind for me is nourishing your relationships, always sharpening your sword. And that's like, what are the skill sets I might need for the next, step? Is it going to school? Is it joining a club? Is it volunteering somewhere? Because that can bring so much value add to your background that you can speak to and actually use those skill sets, soft skills sometimes, at your new position. And then also being aware of the network around you, because you never know, again, as I shared in the beginning, and to kind of bring that full circle is you may be one conversation from one person that can lead you to the next thing. And as we've seen a lot of these cases, it's just like, yes, and be that person. And then the other thing too, I think that's extremely important in this fast-paced society is doing less, honestly. It's like slow down to speed up. And the more organized you are, the better you'll be, because organization doesn't move you forward, but it will hold you back. So staying on top of your desktop, or you're cleaning your house, those types of things, so that you can be in the right mental space and have that psychological wherewithal to make the right next move.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Tina.
So I actually, because some pivots are chosen and some are thrust upon you. So I actually had to pivot this past year. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. No oohs and ahs. I'm totally fine. It's not your mother's breast cancer anymore. But it definitely, thank you. But it definitely made me pivot, and it made me think about, what am I doing? and how am I spending my time? And I say that to young people because you feel like you have all the time in the world in front of you, and you don't, and nobody's guaranteed another day. So some just practical advice I would tell you is resist the urge to keep up with the Joneses. Resist the urge to go buy yourself a Fendi bag. Resist the urge to have the nicest, and I just will say live auctions are a great place to find great bags because there are people who die who never use this stuff. It's Chanel and I'm just saying, you never have to buy a retail bag again if you go to these live auctions or thrift stores in really nice places, Newport Beach, McLean, whatever. They throw them, right. So don't, because money can sometimes, unfortunately, lock you down. And so if you get too attached to the money and the debt, then you have to stay somewhere longer and you have to take on jobs that you don't really want to do because you've got a house now and you've got this and you've got these shoes and people expect you to have certain things. So my advice is always ask for bags for Christmas or birthdays, right? Because women look at your bags and your shoes. So ask for them for Christmas and birthdays. Don't buy them yourselves because it's freedom. Because if you don't have the freedom to leave, and I'll tell you something my mother told me. I was at Fox and I was sort of miserable at the time, and my mother told me, she says, Dana, quit. And I was like, Mom, you can't tell me to quit. I don't have another job. No one quits a job without a job. And she says, Dana, can you pay for your rent? Because my mother was paying for nothing. She's like, can you pay your rent? And I said, yes, I can pay my rent. She's like, can you eat? I said, yes. Can you pay your bills? I said, yes. She's like, then quit. And I said, Mom, but I just can't quit. And she's like, listen, and I'm sorry to say this, but it was good advice at the time, I felt like. She says, listen, Dana, someday you're going to be married with children, and no one will care if you're happy ever again. She said, so she's like, be happy now. So I was like, oh. So it's just practical advice because you could have a parent who you have to take care of or a sibling. So don't get and remember, God is your source, not money, not a job, right? And so my best advice around pivots is the finances give you the freedom, especially if you also don't have a family yet. Like, because when you have a family and a husband, you got to have a discussion, you got kids. But when you're not, really think about, take the jobs that are crazy. Take the jobs that are weird, that really don't, and you know what? You're young, you can eat ramen for a couple of years, you're okay, you'll be fine, right? But you worked for MTV, or you worked and did something incredible, and you had this great experience, and sometimes the best jobs don't pay. I'll tell you, the worst jobs pay really, really well. Yeah. Really well. Sometimes the worst jobs pay really, really well. But the fun jobs tend not to. So leave yourself open and give yourself the freedom not to be locked into an income, which is now like, I can't possibly make less than this because I've got a house note now, and I've got all these shoes, and I have no savings. Don't put yourself there.
I appreciate that. Stephen, before you throw out your 30 seconds, to Dana's point, I'm a ramen noodle girl that knows what steak tastes like, okay? It's just what it is. Back to what you were saying, right? You have to understand who you are, and where you're trying to go, and what you're willing to do while maintaining your integrity. I'll say that again. Stephen.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that we can only give what we're full of. And I'm going to repeat that. We can only give what we're full of. So I sit on this stage, son of a father who passed 2 years ago. He was 98 years old. Not sick, went to sleep. Peaceful, happy, full life. I believe that we have to have a decision-making framework that we live by based on our core values and beliefs. And we need to understand, as I shared in the session earlier, that there are 4 Ps on the healthy side of decision-making and 4 Ps on the unhealthy side, on the healthy side, right? Based on our last name, Peters, right? So on the healthy side, as we make decisions in the framework, our decisions are based on purpose, passion, principles, and planning. On the unhealthy side, and you know when you're making decisions from that side of the framework, they're based on pressure. Financial pressure, pain, politics, and other people's personalities. And so I tune into how I'm making decisions, especially the head of my family, old school, South Carolina man. And when we think about it, highly effective people do two things better than average people. Highly effective companies do two things better than marginalized companies: make decisions and solve problems. It's as simple as that. And so when you have those core values, those beliefs, and you know that these two things are important, you have to have a decision-making framework by which you live. And I am a firm believer over time that money will drive the chase of money and things. We spend half our lives accumulating things and the other half getting rid of them. And so as a young person, think about that. Think quality of life versus quantity of things in your life.
So we've had a lot of delicious gems, okay, come off this stage. So we want to take it from you all. I think we have about 5 or 6 minutes. We can take some questions. Autumn, I see your hand up. Where do we have 2? Oh, we have 2 minutes. Thank you for the correction. I was trying to steal 4, but okay. Autumn, go ahead, right here.
Hello. I'll be quick, but you all talked about being prepared, and my question is, what does being prepared mean, or what does that look like? And a good example, you mentioned how the principal, he passed away, and then you stepped into that role. You didn't know that was going to happen, and you had just decided to become go back into the school system. How do you prepare for something like that when you don't expect it? So that's my question, is how,
And
what
it's
does
a great question.
that mean to you?
Great
Yeah.
question.
Thank you, Autumn.
It's too late to get prepared when the opportunity presents itself. When the opportunity presents itself, it's too late to get prepared. You have to be prepared. And so when that opportunity came, I had the credentials, right? I'd already completed my doctorate, ed specialist. I'd already done the work in the field, right? So I was seasoned, incredible. And then internally in the spirit, I felt like nobody could do that better than I could. Because when you operate outside of your own power and you understand whose power you're operating under, the anointing that you have, there is absolutely nothing you can't do. So you're ready.
Next question from the audience. Anyone else? Where's the cube? You have the cube? Oh, give us a minute. Give us another minute. Go ahead. Right here. Thank you.
30-second answer.
30-second answer.
I don't know if this question is built for 30-second answer.
That's okay. Go ahead.
My question is, I'm very early in my career, 3 years in, and I've had a lot of unintentional and intentional pivots in that time. I feel like I have followed my curiosity and it's taken me in many different directions. But now that I'm thinking intentionally about the rest of my career, how do you build a career instead of take a job?
So good.
That is a good question.
Okay. I was going to take the 2 minutes anyway. So you see how that worked? Okay. Knowing your power. So you said, how do you build a career instead of just taking on jobs? I think the first thing to think about is thematically. What is it that you are trying to accomplish in your life? And what exactly is your life's work? Because it's one thing to take a job to pay some bills, right? At some point, we all have to do it. Some of us are still doing it. It is what it is. But when it comes to understanding what your career is and what you want it to be, those two things pop into my mind, quite honestly. Passion work, purpose work, where are you at? Where are you trying to go? Because ultimately, after 2 or 3 or 4 jobs that you just take to pay bills, you're going to be done with that, right? Back to what Stephen was saying, that's also going to help you build. I took a lot of jobs, right, before I got to Google or before I started speaking or became a coach. Took a lot of different kinds of jobs, but the truth is those jobs served me because I have a full toolbox that can now speak to the career and everything I've been working for 30 years, right? Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other thoughts before we close out, Suzanne?
I was just going to say that on the theme, like creating a life vision and mission statement, and I do it every, like this time frame of the fall, the winter solstice, and it's a way of embodying it, not just saying, well, January 1st, I'm going to do this. It's really, how are you showing up each day? How are you showing up in the world? And what is your life mission? That will kind of give you the little inklings, that curiosity. Oh, yeah, that felt great. No, not less of that. And then every month I do like a summoning more of and less of. So I'm like, that went really well. I want more of that. That, not so well, less of that. And I literally take it off my agenda for the next month. So that really helps fine tune.
Thank you, Suzanne. 10 seconds. Go
10
ahead.
seconds. So one, I would say, do take a lot of jobs because sometimes you'll find yourself in jobs that you didn't know you might like. What I learned about myself is I prefer jobs with purpose. I like to be around people who are going towards the same goals. That's why I love working with the military. I like mission-driven positions. And when I'm not in a mission-driven position, which usually pay higher, I go back and forth. I'm not as happy. And I'll grind, and part of my grind is so that I can go do something that's mission-oriented again. But for me, I'm not satisfied. And again, I don't have children, I don't have a husband, like I don't have those responsibilities. So I really like to be a part of things where I may have an impact. If I can't have an impact, I'm not going to be in the job very long.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you to our panelists. Give them a round of applause. And thank all of you as well.